the same blackout night, another 10 stories rose from the dark. Voices left on the margins, but carrying the sharpest rules. These are 10 more tales from that blackout, stitching together echoes of laundromats that breathe, tunnels that return footsteps, gyms that cheer without crowds, daycares that rewrite names. They complete the map of the dark, from glass that calls to water that keeps memories. If the first tales taught how not to be seen, these last ones show how not to be called.
The corner laundromat never closes, but that night the glass doors fogged up from the inside like a mouth chewing soap. Julia went in to use the machines during the blackout. The generator beat like a heart outside its chest. The washer spun in reverse, spitting coins through the drain. On the digital panel, the time counted down from 10 to 0, and every time it hit 3, the emergency lights went out for 1 second. In the dryer drum, a heap of clothes by chance formed the phrase, "Say your..." Julia swallowed her name, ran to the change machine, and let the coins fall continuously to generate noise. Foam spilled from the overflow and traced on the floor a circle that looked like wet salt. The countdown stopped at 2. When the generator finally failed, a breath opened the hatch and sniffed the inside of the drum as if tasting a cradle. Dawn found the clothes dry and punctured by round marks, the size of mouths she hadn't seen. Under the overpass, the rain beat on metal sheets like impatient fingers. Thomas crossed on foot, pushing an empty stroller, practice for his daughter's arrival. With the blackout, the pilaster retroreflectors threw arrows back. From the stroller, through the baby monitor, came a cry in reverse. Notes sucked inward. He stopped and heard above footsteps that had no bridge to step on. The monitor display froze at 0303 and showed for a single frame the stroller occupied by a wet shadow gripping the padding tight. Thomas did not say the chosen name. Instead, he tuned the phone radio between stations, filling the span with static. The crying receded, and the reflections aligned the exit. On the hump, water ran, tracing 2 little foot impressions pointed upward. When he got home, the stroller smelled of scrap iron and sea air, and the monitor, with no batteries, repeated, "Do not cross on 3."
The cold room kept crates up to the ceiling. In the blackout, Fabio got trapped inside with the street generator dying in hiccups. The hook rails swayed with no wind like undecided pendulums. With each thump, his breath turned to vapor and sketched letters he pretended not to see. On the floor, an old salt line circled the central drain. The veterans joked about that circle. When all went dark, the hanging meat creaked to one side, like an audience turning its face all at once. Fabio lit a safety flare. The red light made the shadows shrink, and the vapor for an instant wrote, "No blood." The vibration in the floor became steps coming from below, knocking on hollow metal. He reinforced the salty edge with what he had, crushed ice and brine, and the sound retreated to the drain. When they reopened the door at 412, they found watermarks on the inner panel, from top to bottom, as if something far too tall had slid back down. With the city dark, Aunt Rosa stayed at the daycare, watching the empty cribs. On the wall, children's drawings, the tempera paints began to glow in the weak dark, rearranging colors, painted hands forming letters that tried to write names. Aunt Rosa ran to the school theater's hair dryers and turned them all on cold, producing a corridor of wind and noise. The letters unraveled, running toward the drain like syrup. On the clock, the hands joined at 0303 and stayed there like a broken needle. In the TV room, the stuck DVD showed one frame with all the cribs occupied, sheets caving under invisible weight. Aunt Rosa lit a candle behind the counter, far from the cribs. The shadows of little hands pointed to the exit, asking passage. She pushed the air with the dryer's noise all the way to the gate. In the morning, on the mural, the children's names were written correctly, all but the daughter's, which she hasn't told anyone yet. On the hill, the water truck got wedged between alleys. Jonas climbed the tank to gauge the level with a stick. The blackout snuffed the shacks, and the water truck turned thick, as if trapping air. 2 knocks came from inside, the same tap of the mute siren at the plant. The stick came up too wet, showing a level that could not fit the tank's volume. Jonas opened the vent and heard voices in the water, kitchen chatter, cutlery, a laugh he knew from another house. At the mouth, the water leapt and ran, tracing a name. He tossed a handful of sea salt saved for a barbecue, forming a ring that fumed. The voices recoiled like startled fish. At 4:12, the tank dropped at once and left on the bottom an old napkin glued to the metal with the logo of a diner closed since 1984. Jonas no longer speaks names near standing water. The narrow alley between 2 buildings had always been a cat passage. In the blackout, the cats froze, all staring at the same shadow that cast nothing on the wall. Lordinia, coming down with a trash bag, felt the ground glued to her sandal. The puddles pulled like a tongue. From the drain arose a countdown in meows. 10, 9. Lordinia turned back and cranked her phone radio to the max. The hiss took the alley, and the cats began to move again. But the shadow remained. A candle lit itself behind a first-floor window, and by the light, Lordinia saw finger marks sliding backwards in the old paint. On the number 3, the candle almost died. She blew from the side without a word and tossed salt into the drain's mouth. The count froze at 2 and turned into a distant purr. By morning, there were wet footprints of no one on the wall, going from the ground to the roof with no steps.
In the building across the way, the janitor Morrow climbed to the roof because the faucets had started coughing air. With his flashlight, he opened the tank lid and felt the cold breath of standing water. The access ladder vibrated, steps banging by themselves, like someone climbing from inside out. The sensor LED, the only red points in the night, reflected in the water's mirror, and in the reflection became an eye, the pupil dilating when he breathed. Morrow swallowed his own name and knocked his wrench on the metal, making noise. The eye blinked and broke into rings. On the tank rim, he found an old salt line, almost gone. He completed the circle with coarse salt from the condominium grill. Inside the water, bubbles rose to form 3 clumps of air and burst together at 0303 on his wristwatch. When he came down, the apartment stopped coughing. On the lid, a wet handprint remained, larger than his. Sueli, maintenance tech, went to check an alarm in a dead tunnel. With no power, the rails looked like whale ribs. As she entered, the echo brought double steps. Hers, and half a second later, the same size but heavier. On the radio, only carrier, no voice. She tossed the handset onto the floor, and the noise became a sheet stretched ahead. The emergency lights blinked in the rhythm of a crooked metronome, recalling the UTI. Between sleepers, thin puddles breathed, inflating and deflating. Sueli laid a cord of salt she carried out of her grandmother's superstition. When the blink dropped to 0, something touched the rail twice, and the metal sang her name with no mouth. Sueli did not answer. Instead, she struck 3 times with the box wrench and walked backward, keeping the radio noise full. As she exited, the tunnel exhaled a cold breath that snuffed her flashlight. She went home with the taste of rust on her teeth. In the gym, the futsal championship stopped, and the bleachers became ramparts of shadow. The dead scoreboard kept only the clock stuck at 0303. Someone started a wave in the dark. The motion ran, but without people to make it. Only the sound of clothes rubbing, cleats scraping concrete. The big trophy in the hall mirrored a crowd that wasn't there, wet flags slowly waving. The custodian started a portable generator and fed the PA with hiss. The exit doors opened a hand's breadth. No wind, yet the gull nets inflated like lungs. When the generator coughed, a child's countdown was heard behind the desk microphone. The waves stopped, and something wrote with sweat on the trophy glass saying no name. When the lights returned, 4 seats stayed wet, separated by exactly 13 steps. The trophy woke up cold as ice, with finger marks inside. In the central library, the microfilm room breathed sweet dust. Dario turned the crank and the reel ran backward by itself, showing headlines from a paper he didn't know, dates of the following day. With each title, his surname appeared in funeral notices and vanished when he whistled a steady tone, creating noise. The wall clock leapt, minute by minute, until it stopped at 0303, and the projector, without power, lit a candle glow from inside. In the glass, a table reflected that the room didn't have, full of cups marking water rings. Someone in the corridor asked, "Say your name for the record." Dario raised the emergency whistle and filled the room with a thin sound that hurt the glass's eye, undoing the table. The reel stopped, and inside the viewer, water printed, "Do not sign." In the morning, the librarian found a new reel labeled 1984 on the machine, and his own name poorly erased on the spine.
Rules of the dark. Do not say your name. Keep noise. A living flame protects corridors. Do not trust reflections. If you hear a countdown, do not let it reach 0. And never stop at minute 0303. Which one would you break without noticing? Tell us.